Cabinet has approved the 2020 National Waste Management Strategy. It directs environmental protection and drives sustainable and an environmentally friendly economic growth program. The strategy focuses on 3 pillars of waste minimization, effective and sustainable services, and waste awareness and compliance. To unpack this further, we're joined by Environment, Forestry and Fisheries Minister Barbara Creecy. Minister, good evening and thank you so much for your time. Before we get into what the waste management program that has now been approved and the strategy is actually about, I just want you perhaps to respond to a part of what we just came out of, and it is really an interview looking at the impact of climate change and some of the decisions that need to be made around big business in this country and the extent to which we're holding big business accountable, especially for its carbon emissions.
Yes, Kathy, I think that climate change is the biggest environmental challenge of our time. And obviously, South Africa is a signatory to the Paris Accord on climate change. And like all countries in the world, this year we have to review our nationally determined contribution to reducing greenhouse gases. I'm very pleased to say that in the same cabinet meeting where we approved the National Waste Management Strategy, we also approved 2 other strategies. The first is the Low Emissions Development Strategy, which is all about looking at the major emitters and the major economic sectors where carbon gas is emitted, and saying how do we put the economy and these sectors in particular onto a low carbon growth trajectory. The second strategy that was approved was the Presidential Coordinating Climate Change Committee. And this is really the body that will negotiate what we call the just transition to a lower carbon growth trajectory. And it will represent non-governmental organizations, organized labor, business, and government. Because what we all understand is, and the National Development Plan makes it absolutely clear, that we have to move to a lower carbon growth trajectory. But in a country like ours, where most of our energy is created through coal-fired power stations, this is not going to be an easy issue. So we have to look at alternative development paths, and we have to look at how in the process of doing that, we do not leave anybody behind. And those who are poor and marginalized and living in vulnerable communities do not carry the major burden for the mitigation of climate change.
Of course, on that list, Eskom is one of the highest emitters, and, you know, they often reference bigger problems on their list, so they can't necessarily talk about a just transition when they can barely keep the lights on. And so I'm wondering from a ministerial point of view, what is your approach to this in ensuring that these processes are happening simultaneously, so that even the plans that government has going into the future that we saw with the reintegrated energy plan, that those some of those developments will in fact ensure that we are being more aware and implementing policy that is good for our environment?
Absolutely. And I mean, I was quite heartened in recent times when the CEO of Eskom, Mr. De Ruyter, indicated that he supports the just transition. And you would know that Minister Mantashe has also released our integrated energy plan, that the sector where there is the largest increase in terms of percentage of energy generation is the renewable sector. So I think that there is an awareness in government, there is an awareness in society generally that we have to change, and we have to hurry up and do it.
One of the biggest challenges when it comes to waste management in this country is seen at a very local level, where there are different levels of access for communities. So there are those who have very well-organized systems and others who simply have no delivery at all. How do you plan on equalizing the playing field with this strategy for 2020?
I think that's a really important question, Kathy, because what we understand is that only about 60% of households in our country have weekly refuse removal. And if you still have 30+% of households that have no form of refuse removal whatsoever, you should not be surprised when you see that there is illegal dumping and littering, because we understand that all households generate waste and they need safe and reliable means for disposing of this waste. We're just coming today from what we call the waste choro, where all the waste officers from all 9 provinces were reporting on work that they are doing in their provinces to ensure more effective and efficient waste disposal, and also what they're doing to promote recycling. And I think that we saw that in certain instances, for example, in KwaZulu-Natal and in the Eastern Cape, where there are enormous problems of rural municipalities, there are some very creative ways in which those administrations are trying to ensure that they provide waste removal services, and also are trying to even promote household separation of waste so that we can promote recycling. But I agree with you, it's a major challenge, and it's something that our department is going to have to monitor much more closely so that we ensure better compliance.
To a large extent, part of why systems like this have also failed is as a result of the failure of service delivery at a local government level, in different districts and different municipalities. And, you know, from the national overview, what is the direction that you would want to see these municipalities take, and even interventions? Because the reality is, Minister, some of these problems have been with us for so long, they've always become part of some communities.
Kathy, I think the first thing is that we have to make sure that all municipalities have compliant landfills where there is space for refuse disposal. And I think the national department has consistently worked over many years to mobilize finances for rural municipalities in particular. But increasingly, as you correctly point out, and particularly now that we are seeing a situation where many people are not paying for basic services because they've lost their jobs, a lot of municipalities are in financial distress. And one can only assume that the pressures for financing and for financing of services in those municipalities are going to intensify. One of the things we have also been doing consistently is working with National Treasury to make sure that the municipal infrastructure grant can also be used for the purchase of things like waste disposal trucks, because it's no use national government building a nice legally compliant landfill site and then the municipality doesn't have trucks to go around to households and collect the waste. So these are the kinds of interventions that we're engaged in. But I think that there's also very important work that we need to be doing at a community level to encourage communities not to dispose of waste illegally, and to also encourage communities to have an understanding of recycling and why this is not only beneficial to the overall environment, but it is also beneficial to people's own living space.
Environment, Forestry and Fisheries Minister Barbara Creecy. Let's leave it there for tonight. Thanks for your time.